Hello. Hi. So we are here to fix this issue of loneliness. My name is Gitika Nayyar and you're watching Morning Reset with me on YouTube. And you can share this with anybody who you think feels lonely. अब जाके किसी को बोल मत देना look I know you're lonely, please take this video. But we can figure out if somebody's lonely, if somebody's going through a rough patch in their lives. Just hand them this video, maybe share, and maybe if you want to do it, you can do it. Also, this is not just for people who are lonely in life. This is uh, when we are finding a solution for this loneliness, we are actually finding a lot of answers that are within us. So when I think about loneliness, I think about that yes, there is an external party who I miss maybe, or who is around and I don't get that attachment maybe. But there is also this deep thing within us which causes the loneliness. Now I'll give you an example with this. Are there days when you have a really good day? Maybe at your job, at your work, or in your home, you had a really good day, you had a fruitful, productive day. By the end of the day, you were so tired and you felt so fulfilled inside you that you did not feel sad or you did not feel that there was something missing. But if you had a not so good day or a bad day or an unfulfilled day at your work, or somebody said to you something at work, then you really miss some company, then you miss people. I'm not saying that people are not important. Of course, we are social human beings. लोग हमारे लिए हमेशा इम्पॉर्टेंट होते हैं, रिश्ते बहुत बहुत ज़रूरी हैं लाइफ के लिए, रिलेशनशिप्स आर utmost important. But you can't force relationships. We are like a mirror to other people. What we think about ourselves, the other people think about ourselves. The way we treat ourselves, the other people treat us. So अगर आपको for example in your home, maybe you are a homemaker and you feel कि my family doesn't respect me. I do so much for the family. I put food on the table, hot food on the table. I take care of the children. I take care of the needs of my husband. But still, he doesn't put me first. वो मुझे पहली प्रायोरिटी नहीं देते हैं. And you feel kind of lost and you feel कि ये क्यों मेरे साथ हो रहा है. Then at that moment, क्या होता है ना हमारा, we call a friend, we complain, or we call our moms and we complain. बट एट दैट मोमेंट जस्ट रिकग्नाइज कि अपने अंदर आप अपने को कैसा ट्रीट करते हो. देखो, हमारे पास दिन में 24 घंटे हैं. अगर हम 24 के 24 घंटे दूसरों को दे रहे हैं तो हम अपने पास कितने घंटे रख रहे हैं. लाइक दिस इज अ बैड एग्जाम्पल, बट अगर हमारे पास 4 मिठाई है और हम चारों किसी को दे रहे हैं तो हम अपने पास क्या रख रहे हैं, राइट? What is the time that you are giving to yourself where nobody else comes in that time? Maybe time for your exercise, time for your meditation, time for your journaling, time for your coloring, drawing, some hobby, which is only for yourself, only to fulfill yourself. Time with friends, time for a movie, time for a coffee date with your own self. Where do you give yourself the priority? Are you taking care of your skin? Are you taking care of your grooming? Are you taking care of your clothes? Are you your number one priority? अगर आप अपने नंबर वन प्रायोरिटी नहीं हैं तो आप कैसे एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं कोई और आपको दिखेगा. वो देखा है, कई पेरेंट्स होते हैं जिनके बच्चों को आप कुछ भी बोल सकते हो जाके, अरे तुम्हारा लड़का तो ऐसा है, तुम्हारी लड़की तो ऐसी है. वो पेरेंट्स सुन लेते हैं और जाके अपने बच्चों को झाड़ भी देते हैं कि देखो फलान रिश्तेदार तुम्हारे बारे में ये कह रहा था. बट ऐसे पेरेंट्स देखे हैं जिनके बच्चों के बारे में आप कुछ नहीं बोल सकते हो, बिकॉज दे विल नॉट लिसन, बिकॉज दे नो हु दे किड्स आर. दे विल नेवर लिसन टू यू एंड दे हैव दैट डिग्निटी. तो उनके आगे आप मुंह खोलोगे ही नहीं अपना. सिमिलरली आपको अपनी एक छाया बनानी है, अपनी एक इमेज बनानी है which is so powerful that nobody can cross you, nobody can say anything wrong to you, and people will respect you if you start respecting yourself. कैसे? If you will take time कि नहीं, my body is important to me, I'm going to exercise, my body is important to me, I'm going to avoid sugar, take some good things in your life कि चलो मैंने हफ्ते में एक बार एक केक खा लिया, या कभी एक छोटी सी कप कॉफी पी ली, टी पी ली, but have that little bit of comfort around you. Don't leave everything in one go, but at the same time, embrace yourself. Love yourself fiercely. That's the only thing that will take you out of loneliness. और लविंग योरसेल्फ में क्या आता है, ये नहीं कि सारा दिन अपने को हक करके जपते रहेंगे आई लव माई सेल्फ, आई लव माई सेल्फ, बट टेकिंग कॉन्ग्रुएंट एक्शन, looking after your own self, and not expecting anything from others because expectations only hurt us, don't they? So, आपकी लाइफ में जो और इम्पोर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट्स हैं, एक रिलेशनशिप इज वन पार्ट ऑफ आवर लाइफ, इट्स नॉट आवर होल लाइफ. There is a career that we have, or if you don't have a career, if you are a homemaker, then you can think of a great hobby that you have, something that is close to your identity. This is who I am. Your identity is not just doing home chores or cooking or anything. Cooking can be your identity, but then it has to be amazing. Do something amazing in that. Do something exceptional in that जो आपको satisfaction दे, जो आपको बहुत fulfill करे. और अगर ऐसा भी लगता है कि नहीं मुझे इस लाइफ टाइम में ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं करना है, मुझे चिल करना है, then that is also okay. Be happy and be fulfilled with what you have chosen in this lifetime. So that will be okay. Like, I really like the work I do. I'm like doing these live sessions only because I love saying what I say. I love imparting this, and I get to learn so much from this process. I'm a big time learner. मतलब जहाँ knowledge बट रही है ना, I think it's the Jupiter in me that wants to batoro everything. So sometimes I like to batoro knowledge from my own self. So it fulfills me. And the days that I am this fulfilled, I don't feel a trace of loneliness. So loneliness is not something जो बहुत जल्दी फिक्स होती है, लेकिन आप अपने पे वर्क करते रहो ना, तो अपने आप यू आर गोइंग टू अट्रैक्ट द different kind of people, the kind of people who will value you because you start valuing yourself. ओके, बट हैविंग सेड दैट, लोनलीनेस एक बहुत बड़ा इमोशन लेके आती है, वो है सैडनेस. हमें सैड फील होता है, और सैडनेस से भी और ऊपर वाला इमोशन होता है ग्रीफ, जो बहुत लोग एक्नॉलेज नहीं करते हैं, बट ग्रीफ इज अ वेरी डीप इमोशन. एंड इफ यू डू EFT ऑन डीप दिस ग्रीफ, डीप ग्रीफ, देन इट्स गोना हेल्प यू. ग्रीफ क्या करता है, कहीं पे भी कोई ब्लॉकेज होता है ना, बिकॉज आपको एकदम से बहुत सैड फील होता है कि I'm all alone, the person is not responding, or I don't have friends, I don't have family members supporting me. So एकदम से एक स्टैग्नेंसी आ जाती है, एक डार्क क्लाउड आ जाता है आपके ऊपर कि अब क्या करें. सो ये ग्रीफ का अगर आप EFT करते हो, इवन इफ यू डोंट रेजोनेट विद इट, आप इसके कुछ राउंड्स करोगे, so you will feel better and things will start being unstuck in your life. Things will start moving in your life. Grief, as I've also said in an earlier session of mine, grief is not just uh, when somebody dies. Grief is the loss of hope. We thought ये रिलेशनशिप ऐसा होगा और वो रिलेशनशिप ने हमें वो नहीं दिया. सैडनेस होती है, ग्रीफ होता है, इट्स लाइक द डेथ ऑफ अ रिलेशनशिप. It's like the death of something, but death is not always bad. It's good because एक death के बाद एक rebirth होता है. So let's do this EFT on grief, and let's get over this grief from our system. Let's take it out of our system, and इसको हम एक empowered way में करेंगे. आपको ज़रूरी नहीं है उसमें tune in करना है, but if you do feel something, please let me know in the comments what you feel while you're doing this. Okay, so let us start. We will start with the sore spot here. We will rub it 3 times. Okay, take a breath. So let's make it a little personal. Even though I have this grief, that I am not loved the way I want, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I have this grief that I am not loved the way I want, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I have this grief that I am not loved the way I want, I deeply and completely accept myself. This grief that I am not loved the way I want, this grief that I am not loved the way I want, this grief that I am not loved the way I want, this grief that I am not loved the way I want, this grief that I am not loved the way I want, this grief that I'm not loved the way I want, this grief that I'm not loved the way I want, this grief that I'm not loved the way I want, this grief that I'm not loved the way I want, this grief that I'm not loved the way I want, this grief that I'm not loved the way I want, this grief that I'm not loved the way I want, this grief that I'm not loved the way I want to, this grief that I'm not loved the way I want, this grief that I'm not loved the way I want. Gamut. Close your eyes, open your eyes. Eyes sharp down right, eyes sharp down left. Rotate your eyes, rotate again. Anti-clockwise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. Let's do one more cycle. Let's repeat this. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I get rejection in return for my love. This grief that I get rejection in return of the love I give. This grief that I am not loved the way I want. This grief that I am not loved the way I want to be loved. This grief that I am not loved the way I want to be loved. This grief that I've waited so long for love and now love is not coming to me. This grief that I am not loved after waiting so much. This grief that I am not chosen. This grief that I am not desired. Gamut. Close your eyes, open your eyes, look sharp down right, look sharp down left, rotate your eyes clockwise, rotate your eyes anti-clockwise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm not the chosen one to be loved. This grief that I'm not desired to be loved. This grief that I was rejected. This deep grief that I was rejected. This grief that I was chosen, not chosen. This grief that I've waited so long and I'm still not loved. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want. This grief that I'm still not loved the way I want. This grief that I had to wait so much for love and I still don't get it. This grief that my heart is aching for the love that I don't have. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want to. This grief that I'm not loved for the way I want to be loved. This grief that I'm not loved the way I want to be loved. Relax, close your eyes. Inhale and exhale gently. Take a few moments and gauge your feelings. What are you feeling? Yeah. For me, the grief has lifted a bit, but there is some sort of sadness that I feel. So then I can change the next statement and I can do it for sadness. And then, of course, I have to make another setup phrase for the sadness. But this is how you have to be in tune with your emotions. And if you will notice, I changed the lines a bit. The statement was this grief that I'm not loved the way I want to be loved, but which may I also added rejection and fear that I've been waiting so long. तो ये यूजुअल स्टेटमेंट्स होते हैं, यूजुअल फीलिंग्स होती हैं विच वन फील्स. और अगर आपको टैपिंग करते हुए कुछ और फील होता है which triggers you or which is the truth to you, which resonates with you, तो आप प्लीज़ उसको ऐड करिए. इट्स ऑल अबाउट यू. देर इज़ नो राइट एंड रॉन्ग. सिर्फ ये पॉइंट्स राइट एंड रॉन्ग हैं, बाकी आप स्टेटमेंट्स कोई भी यूज़ कर सकते हो. whatever that uplifts you, whatever that heals you. And please remember, you're not alone. And even if there's nobody around you, I am here. Whenever you come across this video, I know what it is like to be lonely. I know what it is like. And I am here. I am there with you. So you have a friend in me. You have somebody who's listening to you. So please come watch this. And if you want, chat. I will reply back. I will be there with you. But never feel that you are alone because loneliness is the worst feeling. जब हमें लोनलीनेस फील होता है तो हमें होपलेसनेस फील होता है, होपलेसनेस फील होता है तो हमें लगता है देयर इज नो पॉइंट, राइट? सो डू नॉट गेट टू दैट. We have to continuously keep rising up, keep showing up for our own self. Okay, so if you are lost and tired and exhausted, if you don't want to heal yourself, it's completely all right. I will listen. So reach out to me. I'm here for you. Take care, and I hope you have a great day today. Bye bye.